Sheriff of Los Angeles County, Alex Villanueva.
Good morning, everyone. We're here to talk about the vaccine mandate and what the impact means here in Los Angeles County. And this is, there's when you make policy decisions and when you do a policy analysis, probably some of the first steps you need to do is actually see what is the impact of a proposed policy prior to putting the policy in play. And what we've had happened with the Board of Supervisors in their August motion is they put the policy in play first, and then now they're trying to scramble to figure out what the impact is going to be. And people are saying, well, I've been talking about hypotheticals. No, we actually have some hard data that we have to live with, and this is the consequences of bad policy making. As you can see right here, the retirements, that number 19.8 are rounded off to 20%. That's 102 people that are already filed for early retirement. And the people that are filing for early retirement, these are people that have the institutional knowledge. They're the experts in so many different capacities: homicide investigators, crisis negotiators, senior patrolmen. I mean, all kinds of different positions these people occupy, investigators. And these are the people that are starting to walk away. That number is significant. And, okay, people with 28 years of plus of service, that's 1,605 sworn right there. And that is literally probably half of, I'm just picking on one bureau alone, that's probably half of our homicide bureau right there. Those are the people that can retire, and they're not going to lose any money behind retiring because they've already maxed out their retirement benefits, and they can simply just walk away because they're just fed up with the nonsense going on in county government. Hit it. Now these people, 238, that's the number of people who have filed for leaving the department in different ways, transferring to other agencies outside of LA County, outside of the state of LA. Some people switching careers. These are numbers that people already submitted paperwork. Okay. Workers' compensation claims. The saying is that people vote with their feet. Now we've also seen a 21.9, 22% rise in workers' comp claims. That's 315 more people than the same time last year. And again, this is all related to the COVID response or the vaccine mandate. Now let's slow down a second here, because remember that 22%. Also remember the 20% from the early retirements. Those two numbers alone, that's 417 individuals. Add the 238. Now we're up to 655 people that are already putting in motion plans to leave the department, or they're already gone from the department. That's significant. Okay, let's go. Now, registered. Fulgent is a system that the county is using to register and track who's complied with the vaccine mandate or not. And you can see the number totally registered, 79.5, and you can see between sworn and professional staff what the numbers are roughly. So we got 75.2% for sworn, 87% for the professional staff, so a total of 79.5. Now let's go on to what it boils down to, actually the vaccine mandate itself. People are vaccinated. For the whole department, we're sitting at 51.7 as of this morning. And you see there's quite a difference between our professional staff at 67.2 and our sworn staff at 42.8. That's quite a difference between the two. A lot of this is driven by people just don't have faith in the vaccine. Some of it is driven by a political ideology. Some of it might be irrational. People have a legitimate reasons why they don't trust the vaccine. And in a department in this profession, which tends to be dominated by people that have more conservative leaning, this is what you expect. In very similar numbers you're seeing in our fire departments throughout the nation, and also in police departments as well. Okay, go on to the next. So subject to determination, these are people who are not vaccinated, are registered in the Fulgent system. That's the grand number right there, 4,185. If you look at the sworn number, 3,137, that is the size of almost our entire patrol operation right there. Similar, it's almost the size of our entire custody division operation. So imagine what would happen if every one of these was forced or was terminated. What would the department look like? All right, go on. So we compared with other counties. What's going on with other counties that surround us? Turns out every single one has a no. Orange County, we put an asterisk because their patrol is no vaccine mandate. Their custody operation, which has a medical component, it has a vaccine mandate. Our department, we have a vaccine mandate for those who work in our custody, our correctional treatment center. In a medical setting, they comply with the state requirements for vaccines, and we're able to accommodate that. Okay, but you can tell the surrounding counties, it's a big no. And most significant, about half, at least half of all of our sworn personnel don't live in LA County. They live in the surrounding counties. They cannot afford to live in LA County. So Riverside County, San Bernardino County, Ventura, all of those, in Orange County as well, all of our residents or our sworn personnel live in these counties. So you can see it's very easy for a deputy who lives in another county to say, you know what, they're hiring, they don't have a vaccine mandate, and they can just jump ship that quickly. All right. Now, let's go on to the next one. Now, a lot of confusion was generated by the board because initially, if you recall, this is the recommendation, board motion number 21. They want to do a vaccine policy, including a requirement for counties to be fully vaccinated, or they must undergo weekly testing. That was back on August 10th. And that was the initial board motion. However, look at the revision that happened afterward. As submitted by Supervisor Solis, now all of a sudden the testing disappeared and all employees required to provide full proof of vaccination. So between that date and today, you're seeing all kinds of iteration and deadlines and, well, how are we going to do this? And because they're asking the questions first, they put the cart in front of the horse. And it's comical, but sadly, it's actually disrupting our ability to provide public safety services to Los Angeles County, as you can see by the numbers that we're showing you. And hold on one second. With that being said, this needs to be aired out publicly. And we need to hear this debate. And what we're getting is this Zoom thing, just like right now, as we speak, there's another Zoom meeting of the board. But go on to the next. SoFi Stadium. Next one. Dodger Stadium. Last but not least, Staples Center. All of these places, people are congregating shoulder to shoulder, screaming at the top of their lungs without masks. And yet, last but not least, this board today is declaring that they cannot safely proceed with a board hearing. That is utter nonsense. It's a violation of the Brown Act. Everything they're doing is a violation of the Brown Act because they're deliberately excluding the public from participating fully in airing all of the motions and all the decisions that the board is making, which are being made behind closed doors, behind plexiglass, and you don't really need to know why. And this is what's going on right now. So you explain why that's okay, but they're saying that they can't safely do a meeting in public at the Hall Administration. In fact, I have one supervisor who has never attended a board meeting in public, Supervisor Holly Mitchell. If you notice here, it's Mark Ridley Thomas on the screen. So something's going on, something's rotten, and we need to fix it. But as it impacts decision making and the vaccine mandate, we have a lot of ground to cover, and we need to have our board have realistic policies that are based on facts, based on science. If you look at the entire county and what is achieved by trying to impose a mandate that you physically can't impose without losing a huge segment of your employee, your workforce, in comparison to the entire population of the county, the facts don't support it. They just don't. All right. With that said, any questions?
Has anyone specifically quit or retired early because of the vaccine mandate? And if so, how many employees? And how do you know it was for that specific reason?
Well, I just showed you the uptick.
Has
The
anyone actually specifically
That's the information that we're getting from our employees, and that's what we're seeing from the increase. And just the Fulgent requirement alone, in fact, let me point to the Fulgent. The whole Fulgent system was designed to have a database to see who's vaccinated and who's not vaccinated. But the county, in their infinite wisdom, decided, hey, let's do a population study so we can explore vaccine equity. And then you start asking questions about people's sexual orientation, all kinds of very personal questions, with the promise that they're not going to share it with anybody else and it's just for a study on population. Why on earth would you blend the two things when people are already very hesitant to provide personal data to anybody because of all the issues with data breaches? And that's what the county did. So, armed with that information, just on the registration, we're getting to where we need to be on the registration. But yes, people are not happy with the vaccine mandate. The fact that we're seeing the uptick, we are attributing it to the vaccine mandate.
But what's your proof? Do the deputies have to get other vaccines as part of their employment with the county in order to be an LA County Sheriff?
No.
There's no.
No.
So Sheriff, what are you trying to accomplish by your public relations campaign on this subject? Are you hoping the board will rescind the motion?
I think the board needs to actually start doing policies based on facts and doing studies first and understanding what they're doing and asking the impact first before committing themselves. Because they literally went all the way down the rabbit hole without asking, hey, is this the right hill to die on? Because you have to weigh the benefit and the cost to any policy. For example, and we have competing priorities because the vaccines are good, they save lives, particularly for the individual because they're going to minimize the impact of severe complications. We all know that. However, not everyone believes that. But because we have competing priorities, we have to provide public safety. And right now I'm severely understaffed as it is, as the most understaffed agency in the entire nation. To throw this on top of that, you're really tempting the hand of fate. So when you have competing priorities, I'll give you a prime example. If you're in the deserted island, you're faced with, you got one choice, either food or water, which one do you take? Well, you know well that you can survive without food for about 30 days, but you're going to start deteriorating. But you're not going to last past 3 days without water. So you pick the water. But the board decided to go down and pick the food and skip the water. And that's where we're at today. I think I got you first, and then Pete, and then you, Frank.
Sure, are you asking every deputy or personnel who's putting in for potential retirement, or leaving their own, self-terminating, are you specifically asking them why? What's your proof that you're doing this?
We're doing exit interviews on everyone who leaves the department, and we'll have that qualified, quantified, and we'll make that public.
When?
Not individually, but collectively.
So what numbers are you looking at? How many of
We'll do it on a quarterly basis. But this uptick here is statistically very, very significant, and to attribute to something else is disingenuous.
Well, it could be the feeling of poor
Sure.
law enforcement these days.
Let her finish her question.
Well, yeah, there is a negative thing going towards law enforcement in general, and this could just be the straw that broke the camel's back. One more thing that, okay, we're tired with this whole thing.
And don't you feel that it's your deputies' your personnel's responsibility not to infect the public? You know, how they're going out, they're seeing people more than anybody else. How can you be sure that they're not getting other people sick?
Well, I have yet to see any contract tracing data that points to deputies infecting anybody. Have you had that information?
Not yet.
Again, in fact, we've seen a dearth of information of contract tracing now this year, but last year there was all the rage, contract tracing and all these outbreaks. In fact, last year it was all about ICUs, it was about ventilators, about positivity rates. Have you noticed that all that language has just kind of like disappeared now? And everything is focused on the mandate? I guarantee you, if you overlay the mandates with the political affiliations of the people pushing it, it becomes very political in nature, but not based on science. And that's my concern here. Pete.
Sheriff, realistically, given what you're hearing on people wanting to transfer or retire at this point, by December 31st, how many people are you going to lose in the LA County Sheriff's Department versus the level where it's supposed to be, where it would be after December 31st?
Well, typically every year we lose about 500 to normal attrition retirement. Now it's bumped to over 600 just on the retirement side. Another 300 on the workers' comp side. A lot of people live with injuries and they just work day to day and they put off those shoulder surgeries, those knee surgeries, hip replacement things. They just suck it up. That's something that deputies do. But when they're pushed, again, in a hostile environment with a very unsupported board of supervisors, they might start believing, well, you know what? Why am I suffering through this? I'm just going to check out and get my body taken care of.
So you're talking roughly about 1,000 right there between, again,
The three categories, that's 655 right there, and we're not even counting the 1608 that can walk away. So you're looking close to 1,000.
and in theory, if they decide to fire people, if they don't get a vaccine here, you're talking, what is that, 1/3 of the department?
That of the sworn, that'd be almost 1/3 of the department, sworn personnel, yes.
So, Sheriff, you said normally 500 retire,
About 515, right around there.
and you're at, per year, is that fiscal or is that annual?
That we're going October to October.
So, I'm just trying to get your number here, because, so where do you get the 600? 600 for fiscal year that just ended?
When people retire, they actually have to file paperwork indicating that they're going to retire, and they usually have to do it within 90 days of the date they want it to be effective. So they're telegraphing this information. So then you see the numbers jump up like that, those are hard numbers.
But can't you pull it
Well, why
anytime?
not, sir,
You can pull it up to a certain point.
So how, are we hitting that within that certain point yet for the end of the year, the end of December 31st?
No, it just depends when the time comes that the person wants to retire. They can withdraw that retirement. And what happened, for example, when I took office, a lot of people had already put in for early retirement and they pulled them and they stayed,
So
which is
exactly
great.
How can you be sure that that won't happen here, that they're just not they're faking it?
We need something to change on the ground in terms of the actions and the behaviors of the board of supervisors. That would be a very good indicator where people would pull back from that early retirement or transferring out to another agency.
But if
so
you ever-
Sheriff, I didn't get to my second question here. Just to be clear, you argue that an individual's decision to get vaccinated is a personal medical choice about their body, said that last week.
Mm-hmm.
That ignores the consensus of the medical and public health community, which is that vaccination is not just about protecting yourself, it's about protecting yourself and everyone you come in contact with. You're obviously the leader of the nation's largest sheriff's agency.
Mhm.
You oversee thousands of people who come into contact with the public every day. Why are you not acting as an evangelist for vaccination? I mean, you send out thousands of people every day coming in contact with the public, and these folks, many of them are refusing to get vaccinated.
Well, I can point to this. We have a population in the county jail. We have a mask mandate. You have to wear the mask. If you're in a hospital setting in the county jails, you have to be vaccinated. And in that population, right now, we have a lower positivity rate than in the public at large. So the populations that we have care and control over, we're doing an extremely good job at keeping people free of that. And you have to remember, though, that human nature is, when someone's telling you have to do something because whatever the reasons are, there is going to be a natural reaction against it in certain segments of the community. That's just nature of the beast. And the same thing is true in law enforcement.
Yeah, but you're their boss, you're the sheriff. Why don't you order them, knowing that the public health and the science say that they could be transmitting the virus, why don't you order them?
Because we're comparing risks. For example, if everyone shows up to see a Dodger baseball game and they're willing to submit to that risk, are we picking and choosing which risk is the ones we like and which is the ones we don't like? How many people, every single person in this room has gone to a restaurant and removed your mask and you ate it? And you had no idea about the vaccine status of the person next to it, yet you did it, you didn't bat an eye. So the question is, no. And that is the whole issue, Frank, is we're picking and choosing when we decide that, hey, we're afraid, or when we're not afraid, and we want to impose that on somebody else. And I say, and I'm encouraging everyone to get vaccinated, and I think we're on a good path. And had they not talked all this nonsense about the mandate, I probably would have got better results at getting my employees vaccinated over time. But remember, the push is against the mandates, particularly when it comes at this expense.
Sure.
Other government
Oh, I have
agencies.
two questions. pinch your map and data.
Mhm.
Because did you guys give to the board of the supervisors any like a report and let them know this is a very dangerous number, you just lose the deputy. So any report to them, and they give you some like reply. And number two question, it's I think so many the police officer, they don't have the enough knowledge probably from you, from or anybody from medical professional. So do you think that anyone can hire or invite some medical professor from UCLA or USC come to here to give the seminar or class to let them know what's from the science part?
Well, in an ideal world, the Board of Supervisors would ask questions first and then shoot later, but they shoot first and then they ask the questions. That's why you see these rolling deadlines, because they're not lined up. They haven't gone through the meet and confer process with the unions. There's so many things that are out of whack here and disorganized. And there's always that rush to, hey, let's be the first to do something. Let's be the first to impose a mandate. Let's be the first to do this or that. We saw that throughout the pandemic. And a lot of stuff was not based on hard data, like deciding which businesses were essential and which were not essential. Prime example. And that was not based on science. That was based on just policy decision.
Other government agencies like police departments and school districts have shown that employees will get vaccinated if it's a requirement to remain employed. Why do you think your deputies will be any different? And could it be that your public statements are contributing to the low figures?
Actually, quite the opposite. I think the fact that I've been encouraging people to get vaccinated, I'm vaccinated, you have to lead by example.
Fired, though,
Hmm?
because that's what you've been saying.
Well, if you go throughout the entire state of California, I'm no different than pretty much every other sheriff. And if you look at Southwest Airlines, American Airlines, their entire operation was shut down because pilots did not want to get vaccinated. And who's flying the planes? People that can say, you know what, I'm retired, I'm done with this. People vote with their feet, and that's the moral of the story here. When you have a captive audience that has no alternative, it's easy to impose a mandate like that. When you have alternatives, it doesn't work so great. And people have to respect the difference between the two. And here, like in the military, it's real easy to impose a mandate because you can't go anywhere. But everyone here is working voluntarily to provide public safety. In fact, when there was no vaccine, these are the very same people that the same community relied on to stick their nose and to get potentially infected. And we lost 50 members of our department due to COVID. And the majority of them were pre-vaccine. And that's a sad commentary, because now the same people that benefited from them answering 911 calls, manning the county jail system, actually transporting, dealing with people that are COVID positive, and they had no protection whatsoever. They had to do it because of the nature of their job. I think we need to start slowing down this whole business about the mandates. And I'll give you a prime example. The nation of Israel has the highest, I think, COVID, vaccination rate in the world, and is one of the highest infection rates in the world. And so there's a lot of curiosities there statistically. But let's slow down on the mandates. Let's start working with our employees to get them to voluntarily comply. Phil?
When was the last time you actually spoke to a supervisor?
About 2 weeks ago.
And I know there's more questions, but can I just throw out an invitation? Is any of your sworn personnel in here that's choosing not to get vaccinated, would they be willing to come up and share the reasons why?
Good question. Most people in this room are vaccinated.
They are? Okay.
Yes. Sir.
Sure, thank you. Patrick Keeley from Channel 4. It's been ages with COVID.
I realize.
I hear your arguments, again, about the supervisors, and as Phil asked earlier, these arguments to persuade them to try to relent on the vaccine mandate. But until that point, until they change the county's policy, are you and your deputies telling the public it's okay to ignore laws you don't like and then not face any consequences for it?
Well, the problem is, one, it's not a law. This is an employer mandate imposed by an entity that does not.
We're talking semantics, though. It's a requirement.
Mm-hmm.
And we all face requirements in our lives. Are we being told we can ignore them if we don't like them?
Well, I'm saying is that when you're the body that's issuing a requirement, can the Board of Supervisors issue you a requirement to get vaccinated? You'll say no because they're not your
Well, no,
boss.
they have. In certain circumstances, you go indoor bars, you have to be vaccinated.
And that, who does that? The bar itself, the establishment.
Okay,
The
but
Board
no,
of
the
Super-
county can't tell me
right.
as a citizen to do that. And the county is telling deputies as a condition of their employment to do that. My question remains, by not following this, by taking this position, are you and the deputies telling the public you can ignore laws you don't like? You can ignore requirements?
Not at all. Not at all. What we're doing is, one, we're not mandating that the public gets a vaccine. And we have to deal with the public, vaccinated, unvaccinated, with COVID, without COVID. We're still have to deal with them. So we have the deputies do all their precautions. We had deputies suited up in all the PPE gear going into calls for service on a 911 call. Imagine that. And this is pre-vaccine. No one said a word about it other than thanking the deputies for what they're doing. Now the tables have reversed somehow, in a sense, in some people's mind, and I'm just not buying that argument at all. I think we're better off pursuing a voluntary, encouraging people. Instead of using the hammer approach, there's a carrot method. Why are we not using the carrot? Why are we not encouraging people to get vaccinated? And there's ways we can do that successfully. It'll lead to a higher rate of vaccination for our employees, and armed with information about, are we actually, what happened to the contract tracing? Did it just disappear? Do you have any outbreak that came tied to a deputy? We have none.
Sure, forgive me though, we're talking about policy right now. The policy has already been adopted by the county, and my question to you is specifically, are you and your deputies sending the public a message, you can ignore requirements you don't like?
We're not sending that message at all. No, you're editorializing what you want to believe, which is fine. That is your right.
Not at all.
But I'm not buying that.
Do you agree with the science? I mean, do you reject the idea that your deputies who are unvaccinated can carry and infect somebody else if they're carrying the virus?
Well, what we do know is that, first, and this is part that people are not realizing, we're in October of 2021. We've been living with this virus now for close to approaching 2 years. When you're sick, you stay home. If you're someone who has an issue, get vaccinated. By all means, it helps everyone to get vaccinated. However, you can still infect with the COVID. You can still affect with the vaccination. You can be a carrier with the vaccination. So it's not a foolproof method. It reduces the odds. It does not eliminate the odds. And we're here playing the odds. So the point is, if you're wearing a mask, you're minimizing contact. Well, again, how many people are eating at a restaurant, but then you're worried about a cop that may or may not show up at your door on a call for service? I think I'm looking at risk that each person is bearing, and the collective risk does not justify this type of an intrusion. I think that should be up to the individual. And let's go back to the smallpox, turn of the century. They had a 30% mortality rate, and if you survived, you were going to be really disfigured. And that's a Supreme Court decision from 1905 people talk about. That decision was a guy who challenged a $5 fine for not getting the vaccination. He wasn't fired, he wasn't jailed, he didn't want to pay a $5 fine. I think that's lost in all this analysis.
Stephanie, last
Sheriff,
question.
have you considered like an incentive program, to increase your vaccination rate among your sworn deputies?
That's what I want to explore with my personnel, what we can do in terms of incentive. And I agree, that's a system that makes sense. Yes?
Stephanie?
It seems a little ironic that first responders, as you said, are being forced to do this considering they were on the front lines of the pandemic. Would you say that this law or guidance is what it should be really, is arbitrary, especially when it comes to the sheriff's department?
Oh, it's extremely arbitrary. I guarantee you that. If you look at all the surrounding counties, as we see, there is no mandate. Is there any difference in the infection rate in the surrounding counties? No. There's only one county that's trying to defund and destaff the sheriff's department. That's Los Angeles County. In fact, they're unique in the entire nation. All of the areas that have had issues with defunding law enforcement, New York, Chicago, Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle, the two Rochesters, they've already backpedaled, done a 180, and now fully funded their law enforcement. In fact, now they're begging to get people to join their ranks because they were depleted because of the whole defunding movement. The only one entity in the entire nation is steadfast in defunding is the LA County Board of Supervisors.
Why do you think?
They have a very weird group of people that are in charge. I really. They worship at the altar of wokeism, and they don't understand that their own community is saying, no, we want to see deputies on the street. We want to see reform where reform can be made, but not eliminating the criminal justice system, not taking cops away from the street. That's the last thing they want to see. But the people are making up all these plans. They literally live in the ivory tower. They do all their meetings on Zoom. They don't have any interaction with the public. They don't even bother picking up the phone to call me as the sheriff. Hey, what would happen if we do this? The most common sense thing you could do when you develop any policy. They didn't even bother with that. Ma'am.
Two questions, just to follow up on Patrick's. You said earlier that if something is, in general, is mandated or forced upon you, there's a natural inclination to disobey. I'm paraphrasing. So what Patrick said, how can you say to someone who is exhibiting criminal behavior, we're gonna arrest you for that, after your deputies are not following this mandate, this requirement?
Well, there's criminal law, there's administrative rules. They're two entirely different animals.
It's the same thing, how can you expect someone to submit to your authority?
Well, I have a board of supervisors that's been telling the public not to submit to our authority. You can't trust law enforcement. Every single motion they've been doing since I've been in office is do not trust the sheriff's department. And when our deputies go out and make arrests, they can only do it two ways. Either the person voluntarily submits to our authority, or we have to physically restrain them. So they're driving up violence on the streets by all these motions. So it's kind of disingenuous to now turn around and say, well, you need to respect the rule of law, yet they're the ones actually undermining the rule of law by their actions against the sheriff's department.
So what do you tell a criminal on the street who does not want to comply with your deputy's authority?
Well, I encourage them to comply, and my deputies can be very persuasive. And
What does that mean?
they'll get the job done. With the minimum amount of force necessary, they're making the arrest. In spite of a district attorney who's not going to file on a lot of these cases, they're still getting the job done.
But how can you say that while you're giving them free rein to not obey this vaccine mandate? It is apples and apples. That's the point.
I don't think it's apples and apples and all. First of all, the Board of Supervisors, may not be aware of this, they don't run the Sheriff's Department. They're not in position to put regulations on sheriff's employees or the district attorney for that matter, or the assessor's office. They have 34 other county departments where the Board of Supervisors is the administrator. They appoint a figurehead who is the department head, but they're actually they run the executive branch of county government, and it includes all of those departments.
NYPD has shown that only 34 people were
Mhm.
benched. That was so different than the numbers that they were expecting. How can we believe these numbers aren't just trying to inflate?
We don't inflate anything, man. These are hard numbers we're getting out of personnel. If you don't believe them, well, who else are you going to go to?
Could I ask you
All right,
one
that's
question,
it.
Sheriff?
That's it.
Thank you.
Sheriff, could we ask
All
one
right.
last?
¿Me puede,
Sí.
por favor, nada más, básicamente decirme sobre las estadísticas que
Ujú.
usted tiene en su pantalla en español?
Sí.
Si me responde un par de preguntas después
Sí.
de que hable de las estadísticas, te lo agradecería.
Sí, vamos al principio. Esa primera estadística son de los retiros que se están jubilando antes de tiempo. Es un aumento de 20%. Primer índice de preocupación. Esos son el número de personas de la ley y la orden, los oficiales, que ya tienen 28 años de servicio o más. 1,605, y ellos pueden jubilarse de la noche a la mañana y no pierden nada.
Pero se
Ok.
están retirando más porque no se quieren vacunar. ¿Ese es el objetivo?
El objetivo que hemos visto, ese aumento, es porque no se quieren vacunar. Y eso lo entendemos. Go again. Y estas personas, un aumento de 22%, son 315 casos más de lo normal. Y otro aumento también se debe a las personas que no se quieren vacunar, que están usando otros métodos de salir del trabajo.
muchos de sus agentes, ¿usted está de acuerdo que van y tienen interacción en persona con la comunidad? ¿No le da miedo que sus agentes contagien a personas de la comunidad, niños que aún no pueden recibir la vacuna, por ejemplo?
No, porque ese riesgo es muy menor. Como hemos visto en los juegos de pelota, toda la gente está ahí de lado a lado gritando, la gente va a los restaurantes sin máscaras comiendo y nadie tiene esa preocupación. Y de momento ahora es la preocupación porque llega un oficial que puede ser o no sea vacunado. Eso es, estamos, como se dice, decidiendo cuándo tenemos temor a un riesgo y cuándo no. Y eso no hace sentido.
¿Cuál es su postura final? ¿Usted no va a exigirles a sus agentes que se vacunen?
No voy a exigir porque voy a perder demasiados de mis alguaciles. Y va a ser un costo significativo para la seguridad pública.
Y por último, criticó también a los de la mesa del condado. ¿Qué es lo que les dice? ¿Por qué les llamó extraños o raras a esas personas?
Porque esa gente no están haciendo pólizas bien estudiadas y de una forma responsable. Lo primero que uno hace es recoger información, preguntar a las personas afectadas cómo esto va a impactar su operación. Y entonces ofrecer una ley nueva, un reglamento nuevo. Pero ellos hicieron todo lo contrario. Lo primero que hicieron, pusieron la obligación. Y después ahora están tratando de poner los pies debajo de sus cuerpos, pero ya están desbalanceados porque nunca solicitaron de nadie cuál iba a ser el impacto. Y eso es algo significante, por eso es irresponsable operar de esa manera.
No va a haber ninguna otra plática precisamente con los supervisores, ya que ustedes están...
Yo voy a seguir hablando con los supervisores y voy a seguir haciendo reuniones uno por uno. Ya hablé con la supervisora Holly Mitchell y voy a hablar con la supervisora Janice Hahn la próxima y voy a seguir enviándole este mensaje. Esa es no una forma de establecer este reglamento público.
Usted dice que no nomás es la vacuna o el mandatorio de la vacuna, pero también el índice de retiramiento por el tratamiento comunitario de antipolicía. Usted dice que el concilio ayuda a eso.
Oh, sí, ellos están empujando ese mensaje y quitándole fondos al departamento, quitándole personal. Y encima de eso, perder más personas a través de la vacuna no hace sentido para la seguridad pública. Y eso es algo intencional, yo creo, por la parte de la Junta de Supervisores, que no nos quieren ni en pintura.
Si esto no cambia y eso sigue, ¿cómo se va a ver este departamento en 6 meses?
Vamos a ser mucho más pequeños. Y entonces el peligro para los residentes del condado va a ser mucho más grande, correspondientemente.
Sheriff, could we ask
No
one
more
last
questions.
question
Right,
about-
Sheriff, we got it.
All right.
LAPD has a vaccination rate of something like 71, 72%. Why do you think your deputies have such a lower vaccination rate than LAPD?
It's real simple. The chief of LAPD can be fired by the mayor. That's the difference.
I don't understand. You need dep-
He's an at-will employee. He has to follow the mandates from his boss who appointed him, the mayor, the city council, the police commission, for example. And my mandate comes from the public at large. It's a different animal. Sheriff's department, sheriffs versus chiefs of police. That's the difference between an appointed head of a department and an elected head of a department.
But what about your deputies? They're the same as the police officers. They go through the same academy. They're held to the
Mhm.
same laws. How is that any different?
Your comments are contributing to low figures then?
No, not at all. I think it's a reflection of just the ideologies of people that work in law enforcement. It tends to trend more conservative. That's a fact.
It's the sheriff's deputies
Mm.
versus unsworn personnel versus LAPD officers. What is the difference?
What is the difference? That the chief is going to force the firing of his own personnel.
So what Aileen is saying is that you are the difference in not having as many of your own people getting vaccinated. That's.
I'm not sure what you're getting at.
If the LAPD chief, Chief Moore.
Remember, this entire debate is not being held anywhere else but here in LA County. Have you heard this raging debate at Orange County, Ventura County, San Bernardino, anywhere else? No.
What's happening?
Why is that?
on the East Coast?
Hmm?
Yeah, it's everywhere. The NYPD is going, FDNY is going through the same thing.
And look at all the disruptions that is happening there.
But they only had benched 34 people out of your saying thousands.
Premature.
Yeah, and just-
This is not going to be resolved in one day. You have to look long term, and you're not. You're very short-sighted right here.
And just to be clear, because there's no contact tracing to your deputies of the virus, that you don't believe they're spreading it, those who are unvaccinated.
Until I see evidence of it, that's a different story, but there is no evidence. And that's the problem. You're making a lot of assumptions with zero facts to support those assumptions. And we need to do policy decisions based on facts. And we're not doing that right now.
But you don't even have data about exactly how many